Hi there. Welcome to the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, once again bringing you tips and strategies that will boost your business. And these tips and strategies aren't just from me, but they're from our highly acclaimed guest today on the Biz Communication Show. I'm very happy to introduce, coming to us from Woodstock in the Atlanta metro area, Maggie DeCan. Maggie DeCan recently retired as CEO and Executive Director of the nonprofit Children's Development Academy in Roswell, Georgia, where she served for nearly 8 years. Maggie wrote an Amazon best-selling, award-winning book, Humbled on Purpose, recalling her journey through childhood trauma to corporate America, and then to nonprofits. And she tells in the book how dealing with the implications of her scars from childhood ultimately led her to become a more authentic leader. Maggie is also a certified executive coach, enjoys speaking, consulting, and pouring into the next generation through volunteer work with her national fraternity, Chi Omega, and her alma mater, the University of Michigan. Maggie DeCan has extensive C-suite experience. She served as President, Chief Operating Officer, and Chief Human Resources Officer at Honey Baked Ham. And she served in Human Resources and Operations for Circuit City, Belk, and Macy's. Maggie has been married for 38 years to her high school sweetheart, Bob. They have 2 grown sons and 2 dogs, and she's away from them long enough to be with us today. Hello, Maggie.
Hello. Thanks for having me on today, Bill. Great to be here.
Oh, delighted to have a conversation with you, which will benefit certainly me and definitely our viewers and our podcast listeners. Maggie, I've in the introduction referred to your stint as a CEO and other C-suite positions.
Right.
And there's probably an assumption many people have when they hear about somebody at that level.
Sure.
Well, they grew up with that silver spoon atmosphere. They went to the best private schools. Their parents nurtured them day in and day out, probably Ivy League colleges, and just never had much of a challenge. That's why they're at the top. And yet your book, Humbled on Purpose, tells a different story. So we would like to hear an overview today about the impact of your childhood, the trauma, and then the happy side, how you eventually worked through that to have a successful business career and personal life.
That's a great setup. Thanks, Bill. And getting better at my book. So Humbled on Purpose actually starts out kind of with the humbling, where I get quit, which is a nice euphemism for getting fired from really a wonderful job. And, it's Easter time right now as we're recording this, where I was the president and COO at the Honey Baked Ham Company, one of America's most beloved brands, and just an amazing 14-year career there. And it kind of goes in the first chapter where I take an 86% pay cut to go into nonprofit. Well, actually, the nonprofit turns me down first, and I kind of have to claw my way into this huge pay cut of a job that's very hands-on, very different than my previous C-suite role. And then in the next chapter, I really go back into kind of why I felt it was important to not do another big job and kind of do my chapter of significance later, but why I felt like time was short. And that was because I lost my mom when I was 10 months old, and I never really got a straight answer as to why until I was 13, when I read her obituary and I learned that she had taken her own life. And
that was quite a jolt there. That she
yeah,
Your own.
A girl who's really learning her sense of self. That set me on this journey of I'm going to prove to the world that the right person was left on this earth. And I really was angry and had some self-loathing and mother-loathing and things to prove. And then when I was 17, my dad died of a widowmaker heart attack on Christmas Eve. So my dad had remarried when I was 3, and that's the only mother I've ever known and loved. Carol, she's still alive. But I was a biological orphan at 17, and I developed a control freakishness that is great training for a high-powered executive, but not necessarily very attractive for a 17-year-old girl.
What do you mean by that? What kind of mood or approach was that?
Well, I controlled everything. I didn't want anything bad to ever happen to me in the world again. So every I was dotted, every T was crossed. It's probably not a surprise that, my high school boyfriend and I never broke up. And, I straight A's, sorority president, Panhellenic president, high achievement, worth, valuing my worth on this world through achievement. So it really also made me for not a great early leader. When they showed me the book at Macy's on This Is How to Be a Manager, I read it and then I executed it. And it makes me just cringe, Bill, when I look back at and think about some of the times somebody would call in and their car wouldn't start. And I would lecture them as a 27-year-old about, well, you need to find more reliable backup transportation. And the lack of empathy I had, because I had not lived their life, and especially mothers, well, you need to find more reliable backup childcare. And I didn't have my first child till I was 37. But when I think about somebody lecturing me on having better backup childcare, that's just unrealistic. And so it really wasn't until I became a mother and understood how hard it is to be a working mother. Oh my gosh. And a lot of my employees at Macy's were single working mothers. And I had a great partner in Bob. And I can't imagine, they must have hung up the phone and just laughed, cackled at me about my professional immaturity and my unreasonable expectations. But gradually, I became a more empathetic, authentic, realistic leader. And that really changed for me later. And I write about that.
That's the good news. That's the good news, Maggie.
Thank goodness, right?
That came out of this. And on the plus side, commending you, there are many people who never learn from those mistakes. I can tell you that I worked for some CEOs in my 20 years during management before I became an entrepreneur, who came to mind when you were describing your hard-nosed, hard-driving, non-sympathetic rule book lady. I've been there, and those particular bosses that I'm referring to, that I dealt with, and I honestly will say suffered under, I don't think they ever changed. And I'll tell you an interesting point about that. This was on a college campus, and there were 2 presidents there in succession. I worked for the second one. His predecessor had been absolutely beloved, a genuinely charming, caring person. The interesting part is that both of them had student enrollment kept going up, contributions kept going up, community relations were good. But in later years, I visited that campus, walking around just to sort of see the place again. And I noticed that there was a building named in honor of that first president, But there was not a building named in honor of the second one, even though his numbers were great. And so you've given us a great lesson about leadership there, that there's so many leaders who make the mistake at all levels of thinking it's about the numbers, not realizing that the numbers are made by people, and they're made by people who are inspired and encouraged and complimented. Is that pretty much describing what you learned?
Oh, for sure. There's a funny story. I'll let people buy the book to read it, about me when Hugo came through Charlotte. That is, it was not my finest hour. That's all I'll say. So,
that was a hurricane.
That was a hurricane.
Yeah.
Hurricane Hugo. Yes.
And you thought everybody should be at work the next day.
I just couldn't imagine that Hugo would affect Charlotte 4 hours in. And at 4 a.m. that morning, the cosmetics associates were having the last laugh as I was quivering in my bathtub, praying not to be sucked out of the roof of my townhome. So yes. Mm-hmm.
I think of many examples of what you're talking about, and it to me emphasizes the great value of empathy.
For sure.
For leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We have time to talk about your book another minute or two. What's another major point in there that made you write the book?
I think it's resilience and scar tissue, and leading with your scars. It is so important in this day and age, for lack of a better word, this contoured, curated, everything's for Instagram life, that people be real with each other and show their scars and show their humanity and their humility, because it breaks down walls and builds trust. And when I stood in front of my national conference at Honey Baked and told them why I was a perfectionist and why I was a control freak, they already knew that I was. It really built trust, and people were in line as I came off the stage to tell me their stories and their scars. And our business results actually improved, because when I came in and pointed that the light bulb was out, maybe before I said something great, they were like, Maggie. And I was like, oh, you're right. Good morning. Light bulb's out. So it really, leading with your scars and not trying to be perfect, especially for women who are sometimes judged more harshly than our male counterparts. We learned that from Lean In, which is a book, it's only, I think, 11 or 14 years old. I can't remember which it is, that too many women haven't read again already. It's getting lost in this next generation of leadership. Read Lean In, that women have to be more real and more honest and more authentic, so that people trust you and follow you and believe in you as their leader. And so I really do believe in being authentic. If you're a little bit of a control freak, lead with that. Listen, I'm gonna be in the details, but here's why. And if people know your intent, they will cut you a lot of slack. So that's something that is an entire chapter in the book.
I believe it's author Brene Brown who has almost put a word before us time after time, and that's vulnerability.
Yes.
And that goes along with authenticity.
Yes.
And it's interesting, Maggie, where you talk about striving to be perfect. One of my major roles as the biz communication guy is a speech coach. And when I'm working with my speech coaching clients, I initially hand them a page that has some tips on it. And one of those tips is stop trying to be perfect. And I misspell the word perfect. I do PURFFFCT, and they'll say, you misspelled that. And I said, yes, but you knew what I meant. And that proves the point. You can get your meaning across, and being a real person, being authentic, being vulnerable, and even admitting mistakes before people who trust you for leadership. That does not diminish your leadership. It augments it, doesn't it?
No, exactly. The other point is resilience, I think, Bill. It's so important that people know it's not where you start, it's where you finish, and you can start anywhere. I started, in a highly dysfunctional childhood with an angry father who would sometimes take out his anger on his kids, and lots of childhood trauma. There's a score. It's adverse childhood experience, and it's a 10-point score, and anything above a 4 is supposed to basically mean that you are highly at risk for lots of bad outcomes. My score is an 8. Like, it's a miracle that I'm healthy and functional, much less have been highly successful. So one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was to inspire people that anybody, after you're 18 and you're out on your own, and I say this in the book, you get to make a choice about, are you going to be happy, or are you going to be victorious? Are you going to take a victory lap, or are you going to be a victim? I chose to take all of my challenges and really build on them, and use that scar tissue, which is tougher than regular tissue, to really build on it. And I think people can use that where they have their own challenges in their life. I hope so.
That is a great phrase, that the scar tissue is even stronger than regular tissue. I'm going to make note of that. And when I mention it, I will give you credit. That is wonderful. Maggie, we're the Biz Communication Show. And certainly we've talked about some of your communication skills and even how you improve them. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to have you identify for us the 2 or 3 major communication skills that leaders need. We'll be right back.
Do you wish you felt confident about giving speeches? Do you want to deal with difficult people constructively? And what about becoming more persuasive in sales? Then keep listening now to Dr. Bill Lampton. He spent 20 years in management, so he knows the communication skills you need for success. I urge you to call the Biz Communication Guy today for a no-cost but very valuable 30-minute discussion about your communication challenges. Call now, 678-316-4300. Again, that's 678-316-4300.
Hello again. You're with us on the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, hosting today Maggie DeCan. Maggie, in the introduction, your bio, and it only told a portion of what you've accomplished, but it's very impressive. As you say, you had leadership roles with major companies. And there are leaders today who are viewing our conversation, are listening to it, or there are aspiring listeners, aspiring leaders who are listening or viewing. And so what would you identify, and especially with the process of learning that you went through, what would you identify as 2 or 3 major communication skills that someone should develop to excel in leadership positions as you have done?
Great question, Bill. One of the reasons that I was kept getting pushed to the next level, I think, was because I could have an honest coaching conversation with somebody. I wasn't conflict avoidant. I could get to the heart of a conversation, maintain their self-esteem, but still make sure they understood. They wouldn't leave the conversation feeling like they got a compliment. They understood that there was an issue to be addressed and that they had work to do, but it wasn't a personal issue. It was just a business issue that they needed to address, and that we cared enough about them to have this conversation and to want them to improve. A lot of times I say, we coach you because we care about you. We coach you because we care enough about you to tell you the truth. It's when your boss stops talking to you that you really need to pay attention, because then they've kind of given up on you. So definitely the ability to coach somebody, maintain their self-esteem, and care enough about them to want them to be better and grow and improve. And then the other thing is to have group communication that is inspiring and motivating. I like to use humor, and I know you're not supposed to, but a little bit of sarcasm in there, it just comes out of me. But the ability to talk to a team, and the ability to have a platform speech is something that everybody, I think, needs to work on. I think Toastmasters is a great organization. And if I were in my mid-20s and really wanted to aspire to high-level C-suite leadership, I would invest some weekend time in developing that, or call the Biz Communication Guy to get some coaching. But I think both that one-on-one communication, where you can have a clear conversation, identify an issue that needs to be addressed, as well as a group conversation where you're rolling out a big initiative or doing a platform address. And then, of course, there's always the thank you note, the inspirational, I saw you do something great. That there is nothing better for a leader than to go into somebody's office and see your note pinned up on somebody's bulletin board, that they cared enough about what you said to them to motivate them to put it on their bulletin board. So those would be the 2 or 3 pieces of communication that I would master.
Just last week, I produced 1 or 2 video shorts, YouTube shorts per week, maybe 2 or 3. They're 60 seconds or less. And one of them was on the value of handwritten messages, because most of the messages we get are email or maybe a text. And if we get a letter, often it's which is rather rare these days, it's typed. And what a handwritten letter tells you is that somebody took personal time. I mean, they did something more personal, and it stands out from if it's a letter that comes into our mailbox, or if you stay at work, if it's on somebody's desk. And it's no surprise to me that people displayed those because they were very meaningful to them.
Absolutely.
One time for one question, Maggie, and that is, even though people get places and overcome obstacles and have resilience as you have done, it's very rare we do it without role models. Our mentors, are there any 1 or 2 role models or mentors who helped you to the top?
Oh gosh, I have been so lucky with mentors and role models. Chuck Bengachia at Honey Baked was a blessing from the day I interviewed to the day he walked out the door and beyond. As well as Mark Ahrensmeyer at Circuit City, and Bill Zierden and Pete Douglas. But I also want to talk about somebody who is kind of a working mentor to both of us and connected us. And John Ray, as I have become a little bit of an entrepreneur, I'm now a coach and doing some other things. He wrote The Generosity Mindset, and he didn't just write The Generosity Mindset, he embodies the generosity mindset. He is always giving me a good idea, and he is Maggie, is your podcast up yet? No, it's not, John. I'm sorry, but it will be. He is just so giving and helpful and out there trying to get other people, give other people the best of what he has. So you can be a mentor in so many ways, and he is just a model of what there is. And I am so bummed that my mentors are all male, because my first mentor on the recruiting trail and out of college was Pat Pinardo. And that was my first female mentor. And I've had other mentors, but my most impactful ones in the prime of my career have all been really great men who took the time to see me as someone with promise.
We need those mentors and role models. And you're so right to mention John Ray also in the greater Atlanta area. John Ray, in fact, is the one who referred me to you, saying, Bill, this is somebody you truly want to interview. And I've interviewed John several times on this show. He's interviewed me on his. He's an amazing leader. We're both fortunate to benefit from John Ray. Maggie, well, I know that there are those who will want to contact you. So please do two things. Give us your contact information and also tell us how to get the book that you wrote, Humbled on Purpose.
Awesome. My contact information is Maggie@MaggieDeCan.com. My website is MaggieDeCan.com. My book, Humbled on Purpose, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, almost anywhere where books can be purchased. In the Atlanta area, it's available at Poe's, and it's available at a little coffee shop called Brewable, and it's available at Virginia Highlands Books. And I would love for anybody to reach out and talk to me.
Great story in that book. I'm looking forward to reading it. And now that you've given your contact information, I'm happy to give mine, my YouTube channel, Bill Lampton, Ph.D. And I've been posting instructional videos since 2007. Don't look back at any of those primitive first ones, please. But in recent years, I have produced more than 500 instructional videos, and it's everybody's favorite word on YouTube, free. How can you beat that? So while you're on YouTube, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And then my website, since I'm the biz communication guy, my website, quite logically, is bizcommunicationguy.com. When you're on the website, you'll see a spot where you can subscribe to the podcast and have easy access to all future podcasts. My phone number, 678-316-4300. I welcome calls without obligation for an inquiry. Get acquainted call to tell me about your communication challenges and problems and how I can assist you with them. And before we close, I want to give credit to my co-producer, Mike Stewart, based in Nashville. Mike's website is localinternetpresence.com. Maggie, you and I were talking about mentors and coaches and role models. I met Mike Stewart in 1997. He started teaching me how to get on the internet. He did my first website. And I've relied on Mike Stewart ever since then. Mike Stewart, localinternetpresence.com. I encourage people to go and check out Mike. Again, I want to thank Maggie. And Maggie, we've had a wonderful conversation. In 30 seconds or a minute, what particular central thought would you like to leave with our viewers and listeners?
I would say that you just be who you are. Everything that you have in you is enough, and you don't have to be perfect. lead with who you are, be authentic, you're enough.
Thank you. And God bless, it don't have to be perfect.
So true.
All right. Thanks so much again to Maggie DeCan. Thanks
You,
to those of you who joined us on the Biz Communication Show. I'm your host, Bill Lampton, the Biz Communication Guy, inviting you to be with us again next week for another stimulating conversation that gives you vital tips and strategies for your business.